In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger Livecast.
Yes, welcome to the Future of Tourism, this special livecast by Pakhuis de Zwijger and In Holland University. My name is Michiel Hulshoff and I will be the moderator of this special program. For the very first time in history, the streets in Amsterdam are empty at night. No stag and hen parties, no lousy cafes and bars. There's no clicking sound of suitcase wheels on the pavement. There's no complaints anymore about Airbnb taking over our neighbourhoods. Will the tourists come back? Probably. When? We don't know. How? That is what we are going to discuss tonight. And I will do that with 4 guests. 2 of them are joining me here on the stage in Pakhuis de Zwijger at a safe distance. To my left is Ko Koens, Professor of New Urban Tourism at In Holland University. Welcome.
Good to be here.
And Rudolf Buurma, Director of Visit Amsterdam, an organization that represents over 60 visitor companies in Amsterdam. Welcome too. We're joined from Barcelona by Claudio Milano, researcher, lecturer and tourism consultant who works at the Hostelea School of Tourism in Barcelona. Welcome, Claudio. Later in the program, we will be joined by Maaike Verbeek. She's director at the Den Institute for Culture and Digitalization. She's also a member of the Digital Culture Heritage and Expert Group of the European Union. Welcome, Maaike. And you, as a viewer, you can participate. The only thing you have to do is go to our Zoom account and click the Q&A section, and you can ask a question to one of our guests. Please mention clearly to which guest you want to pose the question, so we can ask that question. If you have general questions about the way the Zoom account works, you can use the chat function. Okay. Let's start to talk about the impact of the corona crisis on tourism. Rudolf, starting with you, you represent a lot of organizations that are busy in the tourism sector here in Amsterdam. How badly are they affected by the crisis at the moment?
Well, pretty bad. They were the first economic sector that was being hit by this crisis, and I'm afraid they will be the last to climb out of it.
And can you tell us something about what companies are in the most problematic situation at the moment?
Well, I think especially the small entrepreneurs. The bigger companies have a bigger buffer, and small entrepreneurs are really having problems keeping their head above water.
And can you give an example of what type of small entrepreneurs are we talking about?
Well, a good example is the guides. The guides who walk people through the city center, they are usually small entrepreneurs and have only one, they're not a big company, and they don't have any clients at all. So they completely have to rely on the government. Luckily, we are in Holland, so there is a government who works on this.
So they get some money from the government, but for the rest they're out of money.
Yeah, and I don't know how long this will be keeping going on. So I think they have a really big problem.
And these companies, when you talk to them, what do they say they need at the moment?
Tourists to come back, and when they're not there, they have to rely on the government or do other work. So there is no easy way out. It's not, you can't help them a little bit in this field.
And do you see that already, or are people still waiting for tourism to come back, or are they already shifting to other sectors?
No, I think that most of them want to catch up with their normal practice, and but I don't know for sure. But I'm sure that there are people who doing other work to get some money in.
Yeah, but like most of us, nobody knows how long this is going to take. But people expect to be back at work quite soon, then?
No, I think most of them know that this is going to take a while because, especially in Amsterdam, it differs from other parts of the Netherlands for tourism to recover because in the rest of the Netherlands, you have a lot of neighboring countries that get their tourists from, and also local Netherlands people go there, Dutch people. But in Amsterdam, there are lots of people who come from far away. So the origin of the tourist differs from the rest of the country. So it's going to take more time here in Amsterdam than in the rest of the country.
So the situation here is worse than in other parts. Yeah. Kokuns, you're a tourism expert who has studied tourism for a long time. Have you ever experienced a collapse of tourism like this one?
No, this is unique, one of a kind, hopefully. But this is unique. We've seen collapses. Several years ago, we had Turkey, for example, where because of the political situation, suddenly there was a massive reduction in the numbers of visitors going there. So you had something there, and then, of course, visitors went to other locations. We've also seen it sometimes in island destinations or in slum tourism. It sometimes happens.
Slum tourism, what is that?
It's tourism to economically deprived urban areas, mostly in the global south. And the situation there is, if there is an incident of violence, it basically means that there's no tourism for at least a month because people are afraid to go there. So you have it there. But that's
natural disasters, maybe also earthquakes.
National disasters, earthquakes. But that's even compared to what we see now, that's a lot smaller. It's local, regional. And the whole industry as such is not so much affected. So when the situation improves in that area, visitors will start coming again.
Yeah, but so we have to rely on data from smaller incidents. We never had a thing like this before. But how does the tourism industry typically recover from this?
Typically, tourism bounces back quite quickly once it starts bouncing back. So once the incident has been, the industry is quite quick to recover because people tend to start traveling quite soon afterwards. That's the big problem with this one. We do not know when people will start traveling again because it's had such an impact on everyone. So the market is basically gone for the moment. And that's a big difference with other incidents when people just kept traveling.
Yeah. Are there still parts of the world where tourism is still flourishing? Or
flourishing is a difficult term here, but ironically, China, domestic tourism is doing reasonably well. I think it's Xi'an and Chengdu. Please, if I say this wrong.
Xi'an and Chengdu. I lived in China, so yeah.
So, okay, thank you very much. Yeah. You basically there have hotel rates now of 36%, which it's not good, but it's a lot better than what we have in Amsterdam now and in other European capitals where we're about 10% hotel rates.
Now, China was ahead of the curve, right? It was the country where the virus started. Is it also then the first one to bounce back? And can we expect that for the rest of the world? Is that your view?
It appears to be like bouncing back now, it's being quite quick to bounce back. There's, of course, a difference with, for example, the Netherlands and China. And China has a massive domestic market, and the domestic market in the Netherlands is a fair bit smaller. So that is a difference. And I don't expect that the European market, which, of course, has many more victims than China in total, it will take a little bit longer, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, because of the borders, the smaller size of the country and the borders.
Yeah, and greater dependence on international tourism.
Okay, let's move to Barcelona. Claudio, you're listening in. You're an Italian living in Spain. It's two countries that have been affected heavily by this corona crisis. Can you describe the situation in Barcelona? It's one of Europe's top destinations for tourism. Normally the Barrio Gótico and the Ramblas are full of people from all over the world. What would you see if you would go out of your house and walk there now?
Yes, of course. What we are experiencing here in Barcelona is a kind of natural tourism degrowth in those areas that were like the most congested one, like Barrio Gótico, the city center, Passeig de Gracia, all the seaside, and of course, it's an unprecedented crisis that we are experiencing here in Barcelona. And in Italy as well. And the main problem, I would say, for those kind of countries like Italy and Spain, and in the Mediterranean region, that we are really dependent on tourism. So the problem for those economy, and is actually the dependence we have on this industry, on this sector. And of course, more you are dependent on tourism, more the crisis will affect, of course, your economy.
I read somewhere that almost 15% of the population of Italy and Spain is dependent on tourism for a source of income. What does this crisis mean for these people?
Unfortunately, actually, in tourism, like one of the main problem, or at least the main issue we have, is the precariousness of the tourism employment. And actually, in those over tourism destination, or like really saturated destination, the main problem is the temporary job we have. As has been mentioned before, like those small enterprises that will really suffer on this kind of crisis. Also because, like here, the Easter is the beginning of the high season. So actually, we can get this crisis kind of an opportunity to rethink how we can manage to solve those kind of issues like precariousness in tourism employment, or for example, how can we help those kind of enterprises and small enterprises that are trying to go beyond this kind of crisis. Of course, in this sense, tourism employees and temporary job are probably the most affected, and also, of course, small enterprises are the most affected in this.
Okay, clear. We're going to talk about the future later in this hour. But first, how do people view? You say Easter is normally the starting point of tourism season. Then you get the real highs. Then we have the summer, of course, that is important for many parts of Spain and Italy also. How are people looking forward to it? Do they see this as a lost summer, or are they still hoping that tourism can come back?
Actually, yesterday there was the new. I mean, all the newspapers were saying that probably to get to a new normal stage in tourism in Spain, we need to wait next year. And of course, yeah, there was a big debate from yesterday in blogs and, like in those webinars like this one in Spain. We cannot wait until Christmas time. I mean, we cannot survive, economically speaking, a summer with no tourists. So that's why here now, if on one end there is a kind of debate within the grassroots organization, social movements that actually are trying to promote a kind of let's rethink tourism right now. Let's don't use public funds to rescue tourism enterprises. On the other hand, we have all the economy that actually rely on tourism, saying we need public rescue. We need to work from this summer to have any kind of tourism arrivals or flux. Also, if it's a kind of proximity phenomenon, but we do need to restart from this summer. So now in this day we are having these debates if the summer is kind of lost, and of course it means a big economic issue for all the economic, of course, for all the sector. And on the other hand, we have grassroots organizations, social movement that are actually seeing the city finally empty. And an emblematic example is the Boqueria, now the market of Boqueria, close to the Rambla, that finally, if we can say finally, is actually having and coming back to the nature of this market. That was a market, a local market, and not anymore kind of tourist attraction. So there is this kind of debate right now.
Okay, so you say that a lot of people that are not dependent on the tourism industry itself, they are actually maybe seeing the advantages also of not having these masses go through the city.
Yes, of course. Actually, there was a campaign in February launched by one of the main grassroots organization here that is trying to do a kind of a critical response to tourism. They were actually promoting all those congested places to citizens and Barcelonians, and saying the campaign was let's use those kind of places and the infrastructure back during our low season that was actually in February. Now, actually, we are having a kind of natural degrowth and a kind of low season, but for external issues like the pandemic.
Yeah, but if the summer is lost, I can imagine the arguments of the groups that are actually dependent on tourism for their groceries are becoming stronger, right?
You mean those kind of organization and grassroots organization, or?
No, what I mean is I understand that there's a debate, right, about the future of tourism. But on the other hand, you have people depending on tourism for their daily life, quite a lot of people.
Of course.
So the longer the crisis goes on, the stronger the argument becomes of favoring the economic.
Yeah, no, of course, that's why this debate, there is this debate on, because in Barcelona and in generally Spain, we are really dependent on tourism. So, of course, the other debate within those enterprises, all this economy that actually needs tourists and needs tourism economy to go on, there's a kind of debate of let's de-risk tourism. Let's try to diversify our economy in a sense that for the next crisis we will be much more resilient to it. Because
yeah, thank you, Rudolf. I saw you nodding. You recognize a lot of what is happening in the debates there.
I recognize a lot, but there's also something I want to add. Of course, in Amsterdam there are 70,000 jobs that are having a problem at the moment, but actually the whole city is dependent on the tourism. You saw it a little while in a newspaper of Amsterdam, at Parool, where they calculated that there will be a deficit on the budget of the local government of 280 million euros, and more than half of that becomes from the fact that there's no tourism taxes coming in anymore. So everybody has a problem when tourism is not there anymore.
Yeah. Do you agree?
Well, to me, what that says is that, like, we might in Amsterdam actually have become a bit too dependent on tourism already. Like, if we need that kind of money and need that kind of tourism that we've had in the last few years, for which a lot of people have complained about it. There's also a lot of people who have not complained, should not forget them. But there are people who've complained about over-tourism in certain parts of Amsterdam. So if that is the number of tourists we need to basically fill the budget, and I don't know if the figures are right, I'm trusting you on that, but then we might be too dependent. So we might want to diversify our economy to become more resilient to these kinds of crises, because it's quite likely similar crises will come up again in the future.
Yeah. So Claudio, so you hear the debate that is going on in Italy. We have it on the stage here in Amsterdam as well. Do you think it is the same debate in all these European cities? That
I think, and I might be wrong here, but I think in Amsterdam we have already a slightly more diverse economy than cities like Barcelona and certainly Venice. So I think we're lucky in that aspect that the debate is not as strong here. And you see also that when we talk about tourism in Amsterdam in general, the social movements in Southern Europe are much stronger and also much more better connected than they are here in Amsterdam. So I do think that our economy is more diverse and is more resilient. But if we are this dependent, we might actually want to think about tourism.
Yeah. Going back to you in Barcelona, Claudio. Maybe the discussion in Barcelona is slightly stronger than here. It is said because the economy is more dependent on tourism than the economy in Amsterdam. So that also means that possible solutions are going to come from Barcelona and maybe some cities in Italy. Do you agree?
Well, now here the big debate regarding the future of tourism is based on tourism proximity. Tourism proximity, new ruralities. Let's use this summer. This is a kind of the debate. Let's use this summer to do tourism, or in our region, so in Catalonia, for example, regarding the debate we are having here in Barcelona. So like tourism proximity and new ruralities is it seems to be a kind of solution in the short period here in Barcelona. But of course, an industry like the tourism sector here in Barcelona cannot just refresh or reset from the tourism proximity. We have an infrastructure, a so big infrastructure in tourism, so many hotels here in Barcelona, and this solution of tourism proximity could be a kind of solution in the short period for those kind of destination and rural areas close to Barcelona. But the mere concept of proximity, it depends on where are you close. So of course the region close to Barcelona and those kind of seaside areas, rural areas can benefit in the next summer. But then we have all a country that actually is so dependent on tourism. So now facing and tackle this kind of crisis, the debate is on tourism proximity and new ruralities. But of course, there we have other space in disputes, like all the second house and what we would call lifestyle migrants, because close to Barcelona we have areas like Valencia or the Costa Brava that are actually they are really dependent on lifestyle migrants for Northern Europe. So there, anyway, those kind of new rurality also will face a kind of crisis because they are really dependent on the economy of UK and Central and Northern Europe countries.
So that sounds like an even bigger problem, maybe. That is different from the Netherlands, right? So all these people that live in for a long time in Spain because of the weather, because the fact they can have a house with a swimming pool, and they can now no longer visit their own houses. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, I mean, there is now this debate. Let's see how, if in Europe, for example, we allowed internal flight, at least in Europe, probably we can see next summer this kind of mobility and tourism mobility within European countries. And then probably those new ruralities, that what we call new ruralities, those kind of destination in the north of Catalonia or in the north of Valencia region can probably start again with those kind of lifestyle migrants that they used to have during the summer or during from May to September. So, of course, I think it's what also Ko was pointing out. More you are dependent on tourism, of course, more will be the crisis when you have those kind of lockdown in terms of tourism mobility and air flight mobility worldwide.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in Maaike Verberg. I'm sorry. She's director of DEN. Yes, you have been listening into the conversation. In these times of social distancing, the computer is quickly becoming our main window to the world, of course, and the digital tourist is on the rise. Maaike Verberg, you are director of the DEN Institute for Culture and Digitalization. What exactly does DEN do?
Well, what we do is we are this knowledge institute, and we are a sector supporting organization. That means that we support the cultural sector in enhancing their digital strategies and becoming more digital in their skills and in their literacy. And that's, we do that because we think that it can be more future oriented and be more resilient, be a more resilient sector by combining the online and offline activities.
How busy are you at the moment?
Well, we're pretty busy. We're stretched a little thin right now, because if you allow me just a little bit insight of what we think that is happening right now, Michiel, what we see is that there is this phenomenal effort of the cultural sector to keep showing their work and to keep in touch with their audience on an online basis, because of course all the houses and the theaters, etc., they are closed. And what we were trying to do in the first few days when we saw this happening, we had the ambition that we could make lists in categories and show everything that was happening on our website. But so also nationally, but also internationally. But to be honest, that was a little bit naive, because there was such an enormous amount of initiative that we switched our focus on what we were also doing in other areas, is that we were focusing on interviewing inspiring examples, showing that on our website.
Can you maybe tell us some of the inspiring examples that you see?
I could do that if you allow me. I could use that in my story, Michiel, because we have this. What we see is that we have this. Sorry, now I'm.
I confuse you, right, with my questions.
Yeah, well, it's because because of this sector, they are they have this challenge also financially, and still they are really adamant in showing their content, and I think that's very admirable. But what you can see if you look at the general picture, that is really ad hoc content, maybe even emergency content, and so it's really short term. And what we now see in the last week, we see a shift from cultural institutions that they are looking more for examples that are more future-proof and that are more fundamented on a strategy and more sustainable for the future. And I think that's a very good progress and a very good development. Yeah.
Okay, but can you give us an example? So what is a good example of this long-term digital tourism in the cultural sector?
Well, we have what we see. If I just go for Amsterdam examples, what we see is that we have this Cinedans festival, which is it's not all big and large organizations, but we have a Cinedans festival that's a niche festival for dance film as an art form, and it should have been a live festival in the Eye Museum, in the Eye Film House, but of course, they weren't able to have that festival, but they curated a very special program on their digital channel, Synodon's Web. And just for the numbers, and now I have to look at my paper because I don't want to have this wrong, they had this specially curated content online, which had more than 22,000 views in 5 days. And if they would have their festival in the Eye Museum, they would have sold approximately, that's what they told me, about a little less than 5,000 tickets.
So that's 4 times as much viewers than they would have expected in non-corona times. Was that also, did people have to pay for the festival?
Well, that's another thing that is happening, because people are looking now and they're thinking that there's a lot of online business models, but that's very hard to do, because if you are a cultural sector, and the more traditional cultural sector is very built upon the business model in receiving an audience and having them and performing and for a live engagement. So it's not possible to switch suddenly into a business model online that creates money. And this Synodon's Festival, for instance, they had a pay-as-you-like button. I see that you also have that one.
Yes, pak als je zegt also, if people like this program, they can pay as they like. Yeah.
Yes. So, they were very happy that they put that on their website, and it did bring about €500. So it's not really a sustainable model for this moment. But you have to realize that the audience online is not used to paying for something. They are really used to that it's free of content. And on the same time, we are even creating a mindset for the online audience that the content is free, because even paywalls are now broken down because of leniency for the rights holders. And even content that you used to have to pay for, like in the US, that's very common that you pay for the Metropolitan Opera for a live stream, or for the New York Philharmonic. It's now free of charge, because all the rights holders are saying, well, in this crisis, people need this cultural content, so please put it for free. So we are also developing more of a mindset for the audience that everything is free online, which I think maybe is not the right message that we should bring across. But in the end, I think it would be very, very difficult to have a very sustainable online business model that really makes significant money. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So your examples are all from the cultural field, right? Now we're talking tonight about tourism. Of course, culture is an important factor in a decision that people make to go to a city or not go to a city. They want to visit a museum, but they also want to do other things in the city. If you think a bit ahead, can you see digital tourism as a substitute for real tourism?
You're asking me that question? Sorry?
Yes, I ask you if in the future there will be more digital tourists going to Amsterdam or to Barcelona or whatever city they choose.
I think if you have, like what you were saying, tourism is also about visiting the cultural institutions in that city. And they are really, they're definitely doing that in Amsterdam. Yes, I think it is very interesting for the cultural sector also, as part of this tourism industry, to look at more balanced content between the offline and the online realm. And now this is a time, if you talk about opportunities, this is really a time where the cultural institution can really experiment what works well. And they can really experiment also in the international and national audience, because they are reaching now a far more international audience than they are used to when it's all an offline content and all an offline
So if I listen carefully to you, then you actually say that this corona crisis might be an innovation accelerator, right? So it can be an accelerator for the cultural field to have a more of a balance between offline, what they have always been doing, and the new online. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it always be necessary to have this offline audience engagement. But yes, it could be an accelerator if they are using this time also. And I have much respect for everything they are doing. And I know it's difficult because you have this financial challenge also. But if you could take the time to really investigate new formats, investigate on a small scale audience surveys, not big data, but mere deep data would be much more interesting now, and see what is sustainable for the future. Because if you look at another example, Rijksmuseum, which is a bigger example, they had this digital cultural content for a long time in the Rijksstudio, and I was talking.
That is where you could download the Night Watch and print it on your coffee mug, right, for free.
You could, but you could also, that's one of the things you could do, but you could also make your own collection of your most favorite artworks in the Rijksmuseum. And now they are having the Rijksmuseum at home, where the co-workers of the Rijksmuseum are telling in fabulous personal stories about their favorite object in the collection, and that is really really authentic, and it's really attracting people. And just in last week they had for over 1 million activities on all their online channels, and that is an enormous rise in audience engagement.
Okay.
So it is an interesting topic to explore and to experiment.
It is very interesting what you're telling us. Maybe one last question about this topic before I go back to the studio guests. Yeah. This whole new idea of having online content. When the crisis is over, then this might even lead to more tourists, right? If you're talking about the Rijksmuseum, if now a lot of people are visiting these paintings online, making their own collection, they will be more inclined to visit the Rijksmuseum when this is all over, right?
It could be, but I think a lot is happening right now in society. So I'm not sure if that is the only thing that people were thinking about. I think what they could also take from this period is that they could also have a very meaningful engagement online. And it will be very different from the real thing, but it's also meaningful. And that's where I think also tourism and part of tourism, the cultural sector should should try to get more examples, experiment, and share these experiments with each other. So not everybody has to learn and experiment and have the same pitfalls. So it's an interesting time. I'm not sure if this will be the effect you are asking me. Well.
Okay, so we'll discuss that back here. Please stay on, because I will have questions for you later on. Rudolf Buma, do you see it? Do you see these examples of the cultural sector? Can we have more online tourism also here in Amsterdam in other fields?
Certainly.
Online bars,
and
online...
They're already doing it.
Yeah.
When you see the Keukenhof, the flower exhibition that we have here in Holland, they have their digital tour at the moment, and there must be more examples for that.
Do they already earn money with that, or is it?
I'm afraid that's not a really big thing that will happen. It's a great promotion for people to come back and visit Amsterdam and the Netherlands again.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kokoens, you're a professor of new urban tourism. Is this a new form of urban tourism, do you think?
I think it's a new form of urban tourism. The question is, indeed, like you already asked, like, does this lead to less tourism or more tourism? I think probably it's going to increase tourism a bit, because like the reasons you said. And my main worry with it, as also Mike said, is how do you make this profitable? And I'm certain a crisis is a time of opportunity. Shouldn't forget, like, lots of tourism businesses that we now take for granted only exist now for 12 years and were founded during the last crisis. Airbnb is the most famous one.
What crisis was that? When
The economic crisis, 2008.
Okay.
It's already 12 years ago. But that was founded then. And something like that is most likely going to pop up now. So in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about, oh God, 2020. Can you imagine this and this company came out of it?
Yeah.
But maybe that's something with this digitization and maybe something completely different.
Yeah. So now the question is, of course, it's difficult to look into the future with so many unknowns. We don't know when this crisis will be over. We don't know how it will affect tourism in the long run. But what do you think, what do you hope this crisis will bring us?
A better form of tourism, one that does not bring with it the tensions that have led to over-tourism. But the problem then is, of course, what is a better form of tourism?
Well, tell us.
It's a good question, if I would know. It's no, when you talk about this with a lot of people, it's about a tourism that's more in line with what the local people want, bottom up, localized, and then moving towards hyper-local, towards local, towards larger scales. And that could potentially be very interesting. Question is that going to happen? We're in a crisis. It's very likely that, Ruth was already saying, small businesses suffer strongly. You need those small businesses to create a bottom-up type thing. New ones may pop up. We don't know. It may very well be that we end up with bigger tourism players becoming more powerful. And that tourism as such might even become more driven by growth, economic interest.
What will that mean for cities like Amsterdam?
In essence, that could we bring back a scenario that we had until several years ago when the debate on tourism was all seen like, oh, tourism brings economic growth. And I think a relatively positive thing that the last few years have brought us pre-corona is that we've had the discussion also within the industry, like, okay, is this what we want? And industry actors are saying, maybe growth is not the be-all and end-all. We need to do this in a way that is also good for the city that we visit.
Yeah, so we had all kinds of new rules in Amsterdam also last week even. Yeah. So Airbnb is forbidden in some parts of the city since last week. So there was some change. Yeah. So you're afraid that this change will be run back?
That's my fear. I don't know if that's likely. I'm not a hopeful person at all, but if I'm a hopeful person, I'd say no, I think we can move on because you've seen the last years that the industry actually was also saying, look, we want to change. We want to do this better. We cannot do this instantly because you're stuck in the system. So that's very interesting now. We now have, I think, 1-2 summers to see what we can change. And what are we going to change? So now it's time to basically put your money where your mouth is. And let's see if we can change tourism in Amsterdam for something that will make everybody in the city happy.
So part of it is the industry that will have to do that then. The other part is, of course, the government. So what do you advise them?
It's not just the industry. It's definitely everyone. Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, the industry needs to change. No, we need to also change as residents and basically work either with the industry or force the industry, if you want to be antagonistic, to change. And government also needs to work with that. And I think that the role of government is very important now. You already see it, that they are taking quite strong measures, because they could also say, we're not doing anything against Airbnb because the people who rent out their houses need the money, but they are. And I think you need strategic leadership on that aspect from the city council and mainly from politics. Like, where do we want tourism to go?
Yeah, Claudio Milano, if you look in Barcelona, since I said you're ahead of the curve somehow, right? The debate is stronger there. The impact is larger. There you will also have this debate. We talked about this before in the program. About, on the one hand, you need to save people's jobs and people's livelihoods. On the other hand, there have been changes in tourism in Barcelona, a crackdown on Airbnb, for example. How do you see the future? Do you see all these changes being drawn back, or do you think they will stay and the industry will change a bit?
I agree with Cole when saying that, of course, what we will probably see in the next year will be probably a new opportunity, and in a neoliberal point of view, of course, any crisis is an opportunity. So the last crisis in 2008 brought opportunity for Airbnb, urban mobility and company like Uber, or all those kind of riders that now are a kind of urban landscape everywhere you go. Now, of course, we will see a new company, a new opportunity coming out.
And do you have, because we're looking, we don't know who is going to be the winner of this crisis, right? But do you have some favorites?
My favorite, of course, is a more sustainable, approach. It seems that we were not prepared. Probably it could seem quite provocative what I'm saying, but it seems that we were not prepared for this crisis. But I do think that we were quite prepared. We were experiencing the Greta effect and the flight shame a couple of months ago, and during all that 2019. We, as Cole pointed out, there was a huge debate. Also, the over-tourism debate was a debate coming out because there were some unsustainable practices in tourism. So, on one hand, I think that this crisis is something that we could smell. And now suddenly coming out. Of course, the future of tourism, nobody knows how, and nobody could imagine, for example, Airbnb coming out before that crisis. But what you could see that probably biosecurity will be an issue. Return policies for the high-line company, we have never talked about or had a serious debate on return policies. Travel insurance was a kind of things that was something just for every tourist and not for millennials or new generation. And probably travel insurance will be something, and the insurance category and sector will probably will be really powerful in the next future. The tourism sector and the tourism secretary ministry needs to work probably in the next future with the health organization and entity. So we can see probably that biosecurity, return policy, travel insurance, health institutions, and the organism will work probably more and will have a key role in the probably next future in the tourism sector.
Okay, and how big do you, because Co is a bit afraid that there is a chance that at some point during this crisis, people will say, okay, please, let's loosen the rules on Airbnb because people just need money and let them rent out their houses if that's a way to support their lives. And then we go in the more neoliberal direction. How big do you think that chance is in Barcelona and in Italy?
Well, I think, when we got into this neoliberal stage of our economy, Margaret Thatcher in that time said, we have no alternative. And after so many decades in the neoliberal system, we have seen how the state apparatus were weak and weak. But now, on one end, we have seen that we do need state apparatus like our health system, our education system needs to be prepared to other crises. I mean, unfortunately, our economic system in a kind of vicious cycle needs crisis. And so to be prepared, probably we need to give back to the state apparatus a bit more power. Because with our private sector, of course, we have giving all our basic needs and expect that our basic needs will be just covered by the private sector could be dangerous if we will face a new crisis in the next year. So on one end, I do agree with Co, and I am afraid that we can go in a more neoliberal direction, because actually those kind of economic crises are always actually providing more inequalities. But I do hope that we are not going in this direction, and we are going in a direction where we can cover the basic needs of our small enterprise in tourism and our citizenship worldwide, and through state apparatus. And of course, we do need tourism mobility. We do need those kind of cultural encounter, but we need to be sure that for the next crisis, our basic needs in terms of society, of global society, will be covered. Because now the big problem is for those people that have precarious job and they don't have rights of housing and those kind of basic needs. And rights.
Okay, thank you. A very interesting viewpoint. Rudolf Buma, a new role for the state. This crisis shows that actually companies do need the state to help them support and survive this crisis.
Certainly.
When we look at tourism, how do you see that role of the state change in the next couple of months, and how do you hope that the tourism sector is coming out of this crisis?
Well, first of all, I think that the way companies, tourism companies and visitor companies are working at the moment, they want to be sustainable, and I think they will stay on want to be sustainable. So I don't think that's going to change radically. And I hope that the city council does a little bit more on working together with the companies. Nowadays, they have a lot of things that they forbid, and I think it's a better way to work with the different tourism and visitor companies to resolve all the problems that there are.
And what would be a good starting point, according to you? What should they discuss with the sector itself?
First of all, they have to open up to the idea that you have to talk with the complete sector of the visiting sector, and they are talking with lots of different groups in the city at the moment, but not with the visiting sector as a whole. And I think everybody can learn from each other to do that on a better field, and that's what I already asked for to the elderly man of Amsterdam to arrange this.
And what was the answer?
Well, they weren't open to it. That was my big surprise. They are open to talking with the usual suspects that they always talk to, and I think this is a great chance to get something new in, and that's to talk with one of the biggest economic forces in this city and in the Netherlands. They have to talk with the complete sector and see what good ideas they can derive from that.
Yeah, but what does the sector want from the government? You say there have been more rules, more and more.
Yeah, there are lots of rules and there are lots of things that they forbid. And in the way that if you don't talk with the sector, you don't know what you will get out of it, because the sector knows what will happen if you don't work with the different people from the sector. We can think of the guides again. The guides are actually people who help tourists to behave. in the way that they are walking around the city. And when you let all the tourists loose, they can do whatever they want. So and I think it's a good idea to talk with all the different sectors in the city to get ideas like that.
Yeah, and how do you listen to the debate that was just going on? The question, the worry that is pronounced that this crisis will lead to loss of these single small entrepreneurs. Yeah. Only the big companies will remain, and it will be mass tourism all over.
Well, that is a possibility, of course, and I think that's why it's a good idea to think about this now. But I think that everybody will work together. It will get a better result. So am I afraid that all the sustainable things are going to disappear? I don't think so, because it's not sustainable to have a city that's only focused on making money. In that way, the city will die, and it's better to work with all the companies and with the people who live there and with the municipality. I think that's always the best balance.
Yeah, I realized that I didn't ask you the question before, because you were the one who mentioned that Airbnb was the new invention during the last crisis. Do you have any ideas where this new company will come from during that is coming into existence now?
I have no idea.
No idea?
If I would have an idea, I probably would not be here. I would be putting my money into that company straight away.
Yeah, but can you help? What would be a solution? What is a big problem?
It could even be the digitization of resources. It could be augmented reality types of tours. Then again, I'm just now talking what everybody's talking about now, and I think the one that will probably end up being the big one is the one that no one has thought of, because I'm now thinking of problems that I see, and I think, oh, this could require a solution, but you want something that's not seen as a problem yet, and that gives added benefit. So I'm hoping that it will be something that thrives off that locality, because what you see is that increasingly visitors want the true local experience, live like a local, and that opens up possibilities for new concepts. Now, I really hope that we can think of concepts that are long-term sustainable and that actually contribute to the well-being of also the people who are visited and the people who visit. Probably my money would be on that one. But what? God, I would only...
Okay, I'm also thinking that this 1.5 meter society does not go well together with mass tourism, right? So that is a problem for mass tourism. It is not for individual tourism.
But what's the difference then? Mass tourism, and when a lot of people are coming to one place, and it's really hard to think of ways to incorporate that and. In museums, I think it's possible. When you're in cafes and restaurants, you have a really big problem. And also when you're thinking about global transportation, it's almost impossible to get that right and still have a good business model. So there's something. I think we have to hope for a good vaccine. And then we are out of lots of these problems.
Yeah, so we will all be, right? Yeah. Maaike, you've been listening in. Is there something that stands out that you want to stress that was from the cultural field? Maybe some input on this discussion?
No, what I think maybe is also relevant for the cultural field is that diversify and resilience is very important. It's in the tourism and it's also for the cultural sector that is very important. And I think, if you look at this and see what is happening is that. Now the opportunity is to look at new online formats, and again, it will. We have to look at more balanced formats between the online and the offline. It's maybe a different discussion as you were just having with your guests there, but. well, they all it's all in the same realm and interesting to follow. And as Ko was saying, I'm not sure whether this balance what it will be. And I think what the cultural institution or what an artist should do is really be authentic and stay with their own story and look how online and offline can help them.
Okay.
That is important, I think.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. So before I thank you all, Claudia Milano, will you practice this new form of tourism? Is Claudia Milano has already left us, I see.
No.
Oh, you're still there. Will you practice this new form of local tourism yourself this summer, do you think?
I think so. Probably will be could be a solution on the short period. On the long period, let's think right now which could be the most sustainable way to plan the future of tourism. And of course, should be really close to our community. And let's use also this period and these pandemic times to have those kind of survey or doing research also with local people in major destination and see how they want to see their city in the future. Of course, these pandemic times is a kind of challenging for the sector, but could be an opportunity also in terms of long-term sustainability.
Very well put. Thank you, Claudio Milano. Thank you also, Maaike Verberg, Ko Koens, Rudolf Buurma, and to the audience at home. You don't go away, go away, go have some food and come back in an hour time. At 8:30 tonight, we will have the next livecast from Pakhuis de Zwijger. It's called Amsterdam Donut City. And Natasja van den Berg will discuss this with Kate Rayworth, the inventor of the Donut City, and Elderman Marieke van Doornik. So stay tuned here on Pakhuis de Zwijger, and thank you for watching. Have a good night.